my training camp was interesting. You know, I took this fight probably with 6 or 7 weeks notice, and which is great for me. You know, I need about 6 weeks to peak. I try to stay in decent shape, and so I started training pretty hard a little ways out, and then about 4 weeks out, just one issue after another started coming up. You know, I blew up my motorcycle engine, which was my primary transportation, so that put a kink in things. Blew out 2 tires on my truck, which, you know, again, that was my other transportation, so I had to replace those. And, you know, so one thing after another. I was training with Trig, and he, you know, ended up giving me a face crank. It busted one of my teeth, so I had to have a root canal to fix that tooth, which then turned into an infection in my face, which then was a major ear infection leading into the fight. So the last 4 weeks was just this stupid roller coaster of hit and miss training, but it was good. You know, I've got these guys over here at Extreme Couture that still made sure I was doing what I had to do. You know, Sean Tompkins and Ron Frazier, you know, they made sure that when I was dropping the ball, they kept me honest. So my camp was solid. I mean, going into the fight, you always think about the things you could have done, you know, what you should have done. I could be in better shape, you know, you start wondering about the what ifs, but the fact is that, you know, I knew going into that fight that at that point I could have been in there with anybody, and I felt good, especially once the ball started rolling. You know, I felt real good once the fight started. So, I mean, barring all the incidents I had, it was a great training camp. Yeah, you know, I'd love to see that fight on tape because there's a lot of it that I don't really remember. I mean, a lot of it went like I expected, but I haven't gone into many fights where I've felt as relaxed as I did, you know, on the night of that fight with Sean Salmon. My punches were just coming fluid and smooth. A lot of times I have a tendency to force them, you know, to throw hard and try to put a lot of emphasis behind them. But that night, you know, we'd done so much work with, you know, with Sean Tompkins and Ron and Chris, you know, our boxing coaches and stuff, that my punches were just kind of coming in groups, you know, 3 or 4 at a time. And I could hear Ron calling the combinations, and I was just throwing the combinations regardless of whether or not, you know, they were all landing. And, you know, to my surprise, the ones that were causing him to fall, you know, the ones that were dropping him, weren't hard punches. They were just clean and crisp and accurate. So I really actually enjoyed my fight. You know, I don't think I've performed as well as I did, you know, on Saturday night very many times before, and that's all Extreme Couture right there. So this gym has helped me tremendously in improving my skill sets and just becoming a better fighter. So I'm real excited about what the future has to hold. You know, I think that every time I fight, I get a whole new list of things to, you know, fix and adjust and address. And that's where I am now. I'd like to see this video, find out where my mistakes were, start making some adjustments and move on from there. You know, see who's next. I'm curious. Oh man, I don't know if I ever have an original strategy, you know. I just wanted to fight. I mean, it was definitely to keep it on the feet. I wasn't going to wrestle with this guy. I wasn't looking for submissions, you know, and for the most part I stuck with my game plan pretty well. I mean, it was, you know, circle to the outside and throw the hands, and even when he clinched up, you know, I'd try to break back away and start throwing punches again, which was, you know, the whole intention. I just never intended to get into a ground fight with him. Couple times I had top position, and, you know, I was throwing punches and ground and pounding and stuff, which works out great. That's how we train, but it's just not somewhere you want to be with a high-level wrestler. You know, the benefit, I guess, to what happened that night was that Salmon isn't always looking for submissions either. He wants to be on top and he wants to ground and pound, and I knew I had some level of safety in that because he wasn't looking to submit me constantly, wasn't tying up my hands like a jiu-jitsu player does. So, the style matchup for me was real good. I just think, I enjoy fighting wrestlers most of the time because there's not a lot of mystery. I've said it before, a good fighter, a well-rounded fighter will always beat a wrestler, always. And it's just because of the nature of the game. It has nothing to do with how good or bad somebody is. You just have more tools to work with. And, fortunately, Saturday night, it was my opportunity to prove that once again. So, my game plan was definitely to stay up. And so I was shocked when that Achilles lock kind of came out of nowhere. The boys are calling it a Boston Crab. I'll call it whatever. I'll take it. I'll take the pass. So, it worked out well for me. The opponent switch was interesting because I was training for a guy named Steve Burns out of Hawaii, and he'd fought once for the UFC, I guess, and then he was on the last season of The Ultimate Fighter, but I don't know anything about him. And I know he's got a little bit more submission game in him and stuff than what I faced on Saturday. So it changed up, my focus a little bit, and we ended up fighting at a catch weight, and fighting at that catch weight really threw me off a lot too, because fighting at 190, I know how to make 85 pretty easy, and I know exactly what I have to do, but I thought I had a little more leeway to make 90 than I did, so I was a lot more relaxed than I should have been, and come time to cut weight, I paid for that, and then, of course, switching my opponents, it was real hard training for Steve Burns just because I didn't know what I was getting ready for. I didn't know a lot about the guy, but then when they switched opponents to Sean Salmon, Salmon, I think, is real similar to the way I am and the way he approaches fights. He just fights to fight, and it made it easier. I would never say somebody doesn't have a high level of skill, but I would say that he's young in the sport. He's been in a little over 3 years, and he's got a lot of wrestling background, but it doesn't make up for it. And so I was given a lot of benefit, in that fight by the switch in the opponents, even though it was a much more dangerous opponent with more technical experience in the ring. It was a chance for me to get out there and compete against somebody that will benefit me in the long run in a lot more ways than just winning a fight. Overall, the show was a huge success. Kim Couture and Skip Kelp, the HD Net film crews, they all did a real good job of keeping the ball rolling. Things clipped along real fast, and the show was fantastic. The only people that lost out in that show were the people that didn't show up. I mean, I don't pay for fights. I never do. I at some point got over going to the fights. So with this fight, I would actually paid for a seat there because the card was just that good. I mean, everybody on that card put on a great show, and it'll be apparent when it hits HDNet, on the 17th of October. It'll be awesome.